As we've been discussing, the Veterans Affairs is out of money. Now, this is not something that was unpredictable. I predicted this a year or two ago when we expanded benefits. Now, I think it is the priority and it is a responsibility of America to take care of its veterans. But we still have to think about what we're doing. We can't say, well, every veteran should have a Corvette and $200,000 a year because we don't have the money for that. So we try to link benefits to something we can afford and something within reason related to their service. When the PACT Act was passed, though, there were those of us saying, if you allow something like high blood pressure to be associated with military service, you may have a problem. I'm 61 years old. 60% of people over 60 have hypertension. You think you might get too many people applying for things if you allow a really common condition like hypertension to be connected to these benefits. What we were talking about were burn pits. And burn pits, you could convince me, and they have, that inhaling things from burn pits might damage your lungs, and you might have respiratory diseases or lung cancers. But saying hypertension is related to this allows Pandora's box, and now we have millions of people flooding through the doors to get benefits, and they're out of money. This is typical of Washington. This year we will spend $6 trillion and we'll bring in $4 trillion. No American family can do that. No state does that. No city does that. No county does that. Washington's fiscal recklessness is putting the American dream out of reach for millions of Americans. Historically high rates of inflation from this debt have made every American poorer. As families across the country struggle to put food on the table, Washington seems content to spend money without regard to consequences. But sometimes the consequences are too shameful to ignore. Congressional spending and mismanagement at the Department of Veterans Affairs are the latest examples, with both resulting in a nearly $3 billion shortfall, threatening the benefits of millions of veterans. Our veterans shouldn't have to pay the cost for the federal government's incompetence. This is why I asked the Senate to adopt my amendment today. My amendment would just simply offset the new money they need for the Veterans Affairs that they didn't calculate well and didn't appropriate by taking it from somewhere else in the budget. To me, it seems eminently reasonable. Rather than borrow more money and put ourselves further into debt, we have a $35 trillion debt. Why don't we find something in the budget maybe that's not an emergency, take the money from there and pay for the veterans' benefits? My amendment would ensure that veterans receive their benefits without adding to the national debt. My amendment is simple. It pays for the veterans' benefits by rescinding $2.9 billion in Department of Energy loan guarantees. The American taxpayers should not be asked to subsidize companies with vast resources, often multi-million-dollar owners that are for this green energy that we're going to subsidize. Well, which is more important, subsidizing millionaire owners of green energy or paying for veterans' benefits? Why not take one to pay for the other? Unsurprisingly, these loans, these green loans that are out there, these gambles that have been taken by the Department of Energy have come at an exorbitant cost. A 2015 GAO study revealed that the extent of the Department of Energy's loan program failures. The report lists that 5 companies defaulted on similar Department of Energy loans, including Solyndra, Fisker, Abound Solar, Beacon Power, and Vehicle Production Group, costing the taxpayers $807 million. So these loans are not without risks. We cut these loans, we cut our risk, and we shift the money over to veterans. I think it's a pretty easy thing. It could be done in a few minutes. But if you'll watch the vote, my guess is that nobody from the other side of the aisle will vote to transfer the money over to the veterans. They just say, borrow it, put it on my tab. Well, that's why when you go to the grocery store and a steak costs $20 at the grocery store. This is why your gasoline costs more. This is why all your prices are up. This is why the home prices are doubling, because they're diminishing the value of the dollar with all the borrowing. So today they'll add another $3 billion. They don't care. They think money grows on trees. Here it is, $3 billion, take it. We care about the veterans, but we don't give a damn about the debt. You can care about both. I'm for shifting money. Let's don't increase the debt today. Let's take $3 billion that would go to millionaires who own these companies and shift it over to the veterans. Pretty simple. How could anybody vote against it? But watch the vote. Everyone on the other side of the aisle is going to vote to borrow the money rather than pay for it by shifting the money. The VA shortfall was very foreseeable, just as the failure of the DOE loans. The VA has been overwhelmed, receiving more than 2.4 million claims in 2023, the most ever, 39% higher. I warned them, when you pass this, when you allow hypertension to be associated with disability, you're opening Pandora's box because everybody's got hypertension. You may recall, I stood here on the Senate floor and warned that the PACT Act would put veterans' benefits at risk. Why? Because there truly are veterans that were damaged by burn pits. They inhaled the smoke and they have chronic asthma, emphysema, or cancer. But those deserving people are having the money taken from people who have high blood pressure. Everybody's got high blood pressure. So if you put them in there, what you are doing is stealing the benefits from the people who have lung damage from breathing in these fumes. It's always about, oh, we care about everybody. Everybody should get money. It's free, no problem. We'll just borrow it. Instead of saying, why don't we try to conserve the resources for those who actually were injured by the burn pits? Instead, it's like, oh, you got high blood pressure? Sign up. Come on down. We'll get you some money. The PACT Act created a presumption of service connection for hypertension. The CDC estimates that 116 million Americans have hypertension. 50% of men, 44% of women, over 60% of men have, or of all people, have hypertension. If you include hypertension as a trigger for benefits, it broadens the category of recipients so much that it's contributed to the depletion of the funds. So instead of asking why we're short $3 billion, no one's asking why we're short. They're just, put it on my tab, put it on the nation's tab, borrow more money. Why don't we find out what the problem is? Why are we short of money? Because they decided to include hypertension as a trigger for disability. Because of Congress's inability to make difficult decisions, precious resources that ought to go to veterans exposed to toxic substances are at risk of going up in smoke. They're at risk of being diverted to people who weren't injured by the burn pits. Congress must take its oversight responsibilities seriously, hold the VA accountable for fiscal mismanagement and corruption. In fiscal year 2023, the VA issued $3 billion in improper payments. So we have the Veterans Affairs $3 billion short of money, but we find out they gave $3 billion to the wrong people. They made a mistake of issuing checks to the wrong people for $3 billion. Why wouldn't we ask the VA, hey, we know you're short of money, but guess what? You got to quit sending the money to the wrong people. Why wouldn't the people who are sending the money to the wrong people be punished, reassigned? Maybe they shouldn't work for the VA if they aren't competent enough to get the money to the people who are the right people. Over the past 3 years, it's estimated the VA has had $10 billion in improper payments. In May 2024, the VA's Inspector General reported that the department improperly awarded over $10 million in incentives to its own senior executives. So it's been determined by the Inspector General that the VA paid their own executives $10 million in bonuses that shouldn't have been given to the executives, while the executives were overseeing $3 billion that went to the wrong people. There are resources that could have been devoted, these resources that were wasted and squandered could have been devoted to veterans, to their benefits. Instead, the VA shamefully squandered them. It's high time that the members of this body face the incontrovertible fact that Congress's reckless spending has awful consequences. We have seen it in the form of inflation. This is what's happening to Americans. It's what's making all of us poor. And now we see that overspending threatens the benefits that were promised to veterans. We must use these failures as a warning. We must get serious about our spending and oversight responsibilities. I encourage my colleagues to vote for my amendment as a first step to ensuring our veterans receive the care they deserve. I call my amendment 3289 and ask that it be reported by number.
Clerk will report the amendment number.
Senator from Kentucky, Mr. Paul, proposes amendment number 3289 to H.R. 9468.
I ask unanimous consent that there be 2 minutes of debate equally divided prior to the vote.
Without objection.
Mr. President.
The senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, when it comes to supporting our veterans, the bottom line is we have to live up to our word and get them the benefits and care they were promised. I'm pleased to say we have a long bipartisan history of coming together and putting our veterans first. That's what the bill before us is about. But this amendment would jeopardize all of that by making partisan cuts to unrelated programs. Our veterans should not be used as partisan leverage, simple as that. Now, I fully outright oppose this amendment on the merits. But even for colleagues who may feel differently, I would urge you to join me in voting against this amendment, because we should all agree that veterans are not fair game for partisan poison pills. Our promise to our veterans and their families is a sacred responsibility we have to live up to, not political leverage. I urge all of my colleagues who feel the same to join me in voting no.
President.
Senator from Kentucky.
This amendment is simply about paying for veterans' benefits. It doesn't stop veterans' benefits. It actually pays for them by moving money from wasteful programs over to the Veterans Affairs to pay for their benefits. It does this so we don't add to the debt. I mean, our veterans fought for our country. Our national security, our biggest threat to our national security now is our debt. I think our veterans would want us to do this in a responsible manner. This amendment makes the veterans' benefits paid for by taking money elsewhere in the budget. It's the responsible way to go.